Welcome, everyone. Today we have an incredible guest, Jepson Taylor. Thank you so much for joining us today. And you have an amazing background from biomedical engineering all the way to generative AI and everything in between. And today I'd love for you to share kind of things you've done in the past, where you feel we're going with generative AI in the future, and of course, what are some of the developments that we are working on today. So thank you so much for your time and welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Starting with things I've done in the past, even back in 2008 and 2009, I felt frustrated if humans were doing things that were anticipated or things that have been done before. So reinventing the wheel. So a lot of my work when I was at Intel and Micron, which was my first real job out of school, was automating. So think of robotic process automation. So engineers might do a task that takes them 6 hours where they pull the data, they do analysis, and they produce a report. That's a huge waste of time. It's problematic for so many reasons because different engineers do work different ways. So you're not coming up with a gold standard for like excursion analysis. And so figuring out how to automate that, where you can pull even more data than they were pulling and do better analysis than they were doing and produce a better report than they were doing and make it all automated. There's so many opportunities to do that. So one of the early themes in my career is if you work hard to put yourself out of a job, you'll find that's impossible. And this goes back to generative AI. Now we're looking at some of the biggest disruption we've ever seen when it comes to AI plus robotic process automation. A lot of human tasks that were considered very safe, like a lawyer doing legal review on an acquisition doc. So when I sold my company, it was estimated, the legal estimate was $1,000 per page on a 90-page deal doc. And so that, because lawyers, humans have to read all of the legalese, now AI can read that entire 90-page deal doc. It'll cost me less than $10 and it will prioritize all the main issues and it will explain them in a lay explanation. So that's an example of an industry that a lot of people know is going to be seeing huge disruption.
Yeah, absolutely. I think legal profession is definitely one. Um, Probably the paralegal, but there's also a lot of laws, right, that need to be created, especially as we move more into working alongside AI. So there's also that innovation, I guess, around new legal ramifications and laws that we need to put in place. So maybe just some of that will move towards that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think one of the things that is related to what you're saying is there's a lot of unknown right now with these copyright lawsuits with companies like Midjourney, OpenAI, the content that they use to train, were they does that violate the license or are they able to do that? And you can still see this today for some of the images that are generated on Midjourney, they'll have watermarks. Where's the watermark coming from? Well, that's an indicator that the images that went into that model had watermarks on them, which means they probably were not given permission. Um, so yes, the legal landscape will change, but I I'm I was realizing a few months ago that I have put $250,000 through me to lawyers in my career. So lawsuits, acquisitions, employment, copyright, just like everything you would use a lawyer for. And I've had a lot of negative interactions with lawyers. And so for me personally, I am probably looking at orders of magnitude reduction in my personal use for lawyers.
Yeah, that's we could all save money on that, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So what are some of the things besides the legal field or industry where do you that you see a lot of this innovation being done today, and where are we going with that in the future?
Well, one of the most exciting areas is in healthcare. So, healthcare, for people that know the healthcare industry, it is so disappointing that you should all be angry. Everyone listening should be angry. That is how bad the healthcare industry is when it comes to leveraging data for better decisions. So, during one of the stories I tell during COVID, we have this crazy new disease. We don't know how to treat it. We have patient level data in the hospital networks. And I was talking to someone on the phone that said, we have not had enough people die to understand the disease. And in saying that out loud as an adult is not something no one should be able to, no one should say that.
Right.
And when this individual said that, I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, we've only had 6 deaths in our hospital network." So the really sad reality, COVID was a failure. It was a
Yeah.
massive failure for all of us when it comes to using data for better decisions. So the reality of what he's telling me is the thousands of people dying in New York are completely useless to me. Their deaths do not matter to me when it comes to data.
Right.
And I like to say, when I die, my data will matter. So when I am in the ICU, whatever ends up taking me, most likely I'll die from an avalanche or a mountain lion or something based on my activities. But if I do die in the ICU, I want all of my data to be used for better decisions. And this does not mean you have to violate patient privacy. This does not mean you need to do anything that would have issues with HIPAA, but this actually goes back to the lawyer discussion. Why was hospital data not freely shared between the hospital networks? Because of lawyers. It required an internal review board that needs approval. People get concerned about liability. So they get more concerned about their own self interests and potential legal issues than they do about patient outcomes. So I'm very excited about the future with generative AI, where it's going to be, it becomes kind of a magical cleanup tool for technical debt.
Mhm.
So there's so much technical debt and legacy systems that live in the hospital networks.
Right.
And before, you needed to hire COBOL developers or people to try to go clean this stuff up. But now you can imagine an AI, generative AI agent that is just doing very technical full stack assessments of any organization, making recommendations, and then if the recommendations are blessed, actually implementing something that you and I were used to taking a team
Oh,
many,
yeah.
many months to do, like a snowflake migration or something. Now, this will just be an automated request or something that requires a skeleton crew.
I'm even like excited, I think, from just coding and documentation perspective. A lot of that code was written so badly, or the person who
Oh,
wrote it
yeah.
went got another job and nobody can maintain it. So I think with help, hopefully, of generative AI, we can better document the code that we have, so we don't have these kind of technical debt issues that we're running into now.
Oh, absolutely. That is a huge one. Because I've been a data scientist for a while now. You could argue for, well, I started writing my first AI computer program, a genetic algorithm, was 2003, which is so long ago, which is really funny. But I've been like a formal data scientist for at least a decade, and I would not say I'm the best programmer. So I can deliver an algorithm, or I can demonstrate something to show that something is feasible, like when it comes to like a new algorithm or something that's innovative. But when it comes to writing code that's completely Python compliant, that has all my unit tests, I kind of lose patience for that. I don't like that as much. But because of the point you brought up with generative AI, it can translate everything for me. I can be a sloppy coder. And while I'm being a sloppy coder, it will be comprehending, adding comments, beautiful comments, renaming all my variables, testing everything, writing unit tests, and that can all happen in real time. This will actually go, this will go all the way just to voice interactions, because there will be a reality where I will just drink wine on my balcony, watching the sunset, and I will be having an interaction with my home AI or my personal AI assistant. I don't need to write code. Why would I need to write code? And so there's going to be a change in user interfaces. So just like you might click through a user interface on a program, you will now have a visual interface where you don't want to be talking to a brick wall. You want some type of feedback to make sure that it's following you, or it might have to show you something that you can react to.
Right.
So I imagine, yeah, I imagine a future where why would you program? No one
Well,
programs
even
anymore.
now with the Google announcements in their latest conference, right? Like you can take language and translate it into another language. So one of the things about that we prided ourselves as developers, myself and many others, is, oh, I know Java, I know C++, I know Python, right? And you specialize in these languages, and that's no longer really necessary, because now if you know Python, you could probably ask Gen AI to translate it into Java or C++ and code it for, you know, document it for you, make sure the functions match, things like that. So
Hmm.
it's kind of a new direction in many ways.
Yeah. It also reminds me, no developer, people talk about full stack developers, but there's actually no such thing the way I'm going to redefine it. So by full stack developer, the fact that you can stand up a Linux system, have a server, and write some React or something on top of it, that's great. The full stack I'm thinking about is having the depth, the core depth to be able to translate your algorithms into OpenMP, raw CUDA, things that are extremely high performant. No developer will have all of that. And so with AI, all the code is going to become more efficient. All the code is going to be easier to understand. The other thing that is going to happen, some people debate this, but I believe we are there now. AI has reached a level of comprehension that it can begin to generate new algorithms. So it can invent new algorithms that are better than anything humans have written before, and that will be the new norm. So rather than you inventing an algorithm, your job will transition to writing the right questions or the right goals or the right success criteria. So you might say, I have an EKG signal. This is what I'm trying to do with it. And you would just have, you'd include the data with a lay explanation, and then this would get to work on processing it, consuming it, writing algorithms for it, and building something that no PhD on the planet would be able to do, but you ask the right questions. So that, which I think is really exciting, but also very disruptive for the industry.
Mm. Super disruptive. So, do you need to be a PhD to ask good questions?
No, I'm not a PhD. I've had a lot of PhDs work for me, but
Yeah,
I'm not one.
yeah, I agree. It's something that, to consider, right? As it becomes more important to be a good thinker, right, and less of a good doer in this case. How does that translate into skills?
Well, the one important point with this, I fell into this issue earlier in my career, so 7 years ago. If I I was more arrogant than I am now. Hopefully I'm at the lowest point of my arrogance, but I used to be much more arrogant because I had exited the hedge fund. I was a quant. I felt like technically I could do anything better and faster than most of my peers. And that had me make some key mistakes. So one of the key mistakes I would make is if you were a domain expert, I would come into the meeting, I would interview you, and within, like, I was almost impatient, just listening. Within 15 or 20 minutes, I understand it. I will go build this AI system that will service your domain. And because of tough mistakes related to that behavior, I have completely given up on ever understanding someone's domain. And so if I'm starting an AI project, I like to say, who's the human who has worked on this process the longest, and why are they here? Why are they not here? Like, let's get, and it doesn't matter what their job title is. Like, let's get them in the room. You want them from beginning to end. And so, so your question about do you need someone to have a PhD? I think it's going to be more about not about one person. It's going to be about a team. So it's going to be, do we have the data experts in the room? Do we have the domain experts in the room? Do we have the IT folks in the room? Because sometimes some industries like healthcare are so complicated, you have multiple domain experts. And so I think it'll be more of this team effort where we're collaborating together on the prompt or on the goal or on the question. We're working together. And then once it looks good and we are okay with this, then we task AI to begin doing the research. But I'm also very excited about AI. There's a scenario where you and I go to sleep tonight, and while we're sleeping, AI is actively pursuing research paths that we have not blessed new within our domain. And what it's trying to do is when you wake up, it wants to have a list of these are the top 10 research items that it thinks you will like, that it thinks I will like, because we'll have different AI models. And those top 10 things the top 10 questions that it thought we would like, it would already pursue them to completion. So you might wake up, you're drinking your coffee, and then you're all excited. You say, "This is fantastic."
Yeah.
It there's alpha. It found this big innovation, and it's exhausted the testing on your behalf while you were asleep. So
Amazing, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
AI is going to feel more like a pet. It's like You're going to give it the external
So
validation
what
that
are we
good
gonna do
job.
with our time? Is it just gonna be drinking coffee?
Well, so the so I don't think we're going to have issues with the time part. It's going to being a human is hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to be a human. And one of the things that makes being a human easier is the creative side. So it's music, it's art, it's food, social interactions. We're novelty seeking creatures. So I hope for a future, because we're kind of used to, we're graduating out of the butts and seats um, culture that we were born into. So the butts and seats culture is you show up to work at 8, you leave at 5, you work here till you die, and don't do any, like, hopefully you don't get fired.
Yeah.
And which is really sad because then you just kind of play it safe. You don't fly
Mhm.
close to the sun and you don't fly close to the floor and
Mhm.
you just kind of bounce around in here. But we're entering a reality where I really like ultra running. I did a 50-mile run last Saturday. I would actually love every week to run. You're running for 13 hours in the mountains. I would just love for that to be my reality, like
Yeah.
once a week. And I could have AI checking in on me, but the thing that's difficult for humans to wrap their minds around is this concept of what do you look like if you're 10 times more productive today?
Mm.
So if you are 10 times more productive, and by more productive I mean the outcomes that measure you by, what do you need to work 40 hours a week? Maybe I would argue it's the outlier ideas that offer the most value to society. And so if you only worked 5 hours a week and you spent the rest of the time with social interactions, philosophy, debating, going out in nature, the ideas you get from the 5% or 5 hours per week can be orders of magnitude bigger impact to society. So we'll spend more time
It's
learning.
true, but I know personally, maybe not everyone's like me, but it's also like we're conditioned a certain way, right? As humans, like you're productive when you are at work 8 hours a day. It's very sometimes hard to change the dynamic. Okay, now I can like create art for half a day. I can go listen to music for 2 hours and then run for three. Um, and it's almost like, am I doing the right? It's like a checkpoint in your mind, like, oh, is this something I'm supposed to be doing? Am I being lazy? Like, shouldn't I be doing something more hands-on, like cooking or, it's almost you're fighting yourself in many ways.
Like the idea that comes to mind is I think in the future, just like we have AI assistants, you will have an AI that's monitoring you and it knows your brain chemistry. We all are unique vectors in the universe.
Sure.
And so if you need your second cup of coffee, if you need your 15-minute nap, if you need to go on a walk, or if it's looking at the temperature and just knowing your level of dopamine and how you find your own internal validation, you might have AI suggesting that. But also, goal setting can be very motivating because you can imagine in the morning you have your first cup of coffee.
Right.
If you're communicating with your AI and you're saying, if I accomplish this morning, this is what I will do for the next 2 days. And for me, that's a huge motivator. But if I don't accomplish this because it's hard, and something else came up, then I'm not going to do this. So everyone's different, but I think you're going to have people that continue to work 100 hours a week because the recommendation I give to people is pursue your passions and then it'll never feel like work.
Mhm.
So if you're doing that, then yes, you will work 100 hours a week pursuing something that brings you joy, but you'll have a lot of people that find they don't need to do that. They found ways for clever supplemental income. Um, that is the hope is more people will be able to spend time with those they love doing taking the mundane things off the table. Like I guess that's a question is if humans doing mundane tasks were able to get retooled to do tasks that where they could make the same amount of money and they were also um, they enjoyed those tasks, could society function with no mundane work? And I think
That's
it
a great
could.
question because culturally we reinforce that mundane work, right? Like it's great if you can create freedom for yourself, but all your friends are working 100-hour weeks in a corporate environment. It's very hard to create that structure around yourself. So it almost has to be society decision in a way that this is where
Mhm.
we're going and it's okay. It's normal.
And this has been debated because one of the concerns people have is if you have too much job disruption, you need a safety net. So the safety net that people have talked about is universal income. So everyone has a floor. And so if you decide for your existence you want to surf every day in Costa Rica and drink a beer and live in a 400 square foot apartment, you could actually afford that. There's nothing stopping you. But the concerns, humans are not that simple because I would argue what I just described, most people would sign up for that immediately. So like if can I please have that reality tomorrow? I imagine I could enjoy that for a week. But the issue will come back to humans need challenge, we need purpose. And so I would argue if that was your existence, eventually it would begin to feel like a prison where you I also love that we're this all of our stories will end. And that does bring an increased awareness around what impact can you leave. And the impact can be so profound. Like if it's in healthcare, if it's in technology, if it's in education. Education, I think, is one of the most inspiring things because something you say to someone who's new in their career, if that is enough to take them to the next level, in a way, you get credit for that. If you can have 10 college kids go out and do something that they were too nervous to attempt, but you were able to kind of mentor them or guide them, that is super exciting.
It is. It's a big impact. I think the other thing about generative AI is that we don't know what those careers really look like in 10 years. Like I can't imagine every career and the skill set that would be required because I think it will dramatically change enough where I personally think that while I can teach the kids the skills they need to from prompt engineering or interacting or being more productive, I can't imagine everything we're going to come up with in the next 10 years that will create new opportunities. It's do you maybe you can. That's a question for you. How do you see what the next 10 years looks like with the evolution of AI?
I I think humans will never run out of new ideas, and the I think the currency will shift. It will pull back from execution and more to the idea. So the example I give is if you have a really good idea, and if I have a really good idea, and if we're competing, then execution wins the day. So if you are able to execute faster than I can, then my startup will fail. But with these technologies in the future, the moment you mention your idea, generative AI pipelines can build the entire thing. Like we're talking like app, UX, the marketing plan, the entire company, the legalese, everything is done. And so it's going to come back to more about the idea. There's so many ideas that haven't been tested yet. So an example would be, why don't we have neighborhood security systems? It's like in my neighborhood, we have an issue where people will come up at 2 or 3 in the morning. They'll try to break into cars that are parked in driveways. This type of behavior is very difficult to assess from an individual home. So if I see you walking to my car, yes, I could throw an alarm. But as a neighborhood security system, if you have a driving pattern that feels like someone who's scoping out opportunities, I don't even need to wait for you to get out of the car and try. So like I think you'll have community neighborhood security systems showing up. The smart home will get much smarter. Every heartbeat in the home will be monitored in real time. Today, I don't know the numbers, but it's like I think 10 kids per year die of blind cords getting wrapped around their necks, like something that is really shocking. Where you'd say that can't happen in 2023, but it still happens. And so I think 10 or 20 kids drown per month in swimming pools. Like that won't happen anymore. So like if you just go down like safety and
Yeah.
health, um, but also music. You're gonna have a lot of humans that are learning to play more instruments, I think.
Yeah,
where with the help of AI.
sure.
So
Or even
I
like
don't.
reproduce new songs, right? I've seen that's made news where you could copy somebody's voice and create a new song and they're in their type of pattern of
Yeah, no, that's I see AI as ushering in an explosion of creativity. So I've had a lot of fun with my I've been sharing my Midjourney art on LinkedIn,
yeah.
and I don't really consider myself an artist, but I a lot of people have been reacting to it because it's super fun. Like I would argue, I gave a talk in Philly a couple months ago, and at the beginning of the talk, I asked for people in the audience raise your hand if you're a developer. And like six hands came up out of 100. And I said, raise your hand if you're a designer. And then same thing, like six hands came up out of 100. And then I said, I hope at the end of my talk, you will all realize that you are all developers and you are all designers.
Mm,
Obviously, there's some that are better
sure.
than than the average, but I would argue there's no longer an excuse for anyone to say they're not a designer or for anyone to say they're not a developer.
Agreed. Yeah, because as long as you know the language, you can interact with the machine to
Yeah,
create something new.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's the other crazy thing too is, well, it's interesting to see how this will level out because we're kind of still in the chaos. Like the wave is still coming. Like we are definitely going to be in the chaos for the next 5 years because for example, if I was going to high school and if you and I are friends in high school, and if one of us said, you know what? I would like to make $1 million a year as a high school student while going to high school. I think we would have just laughed. Like, that's
yeah,
the dumbest thing. There's like, what are you going to do? Roof or go work at like Zoomies or some like clothing store? Like, the options we had available to us, that was an impossible outcome. But there are high school kids, they could make $1 million this year just because of generative AI, just because of having a little weekend project, finding the right vein to pull on. Um, I saw a kid the other day who was doing fashion design, and he was doing the designs, but you can imagine a scenario where generative AI begins to do fashion designs, and then you just figure out the fulfillment side, whether you're doing like a pre-order, like when 1,000 people buy this
right.
fashion design that doesn't exist, then you have an execution channel that builds it, ships it, delivers it within a month. So it, yeah, it'll be so fun to see what the future holds for the new generation. I think it'll be very inspiring to see what they end up doing.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think we're going to see innovations that we haven't seen in a much shorter span of time that we haven't seen probably in the history of humanity, right? As we
Yeah,
know.
yeah, absolutely. Well, and it also opens up a reality where if you look at a Pareto of activity that you have for the week, so document everything you do. Like I did the dishes, I swept, I did these things. You'll actually be able to look at that Pareto, and there's a future where a significant fraction of the activities that you would prefer to not do will just be gone,
Yeah.
which is great because what are you going to fill that with? More more time talking with friends, more time taking the kids to the pool, more time going on family adventures, or more time learning, or more time doing music.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
I would love your ideas on more, if someone's listening to this and they want to learn more, what are some resources that you recommend? How would you approach learning generative AI in general?
I know Andrew Ng has a really good course on Coursera. He's considered probably one of the top 5 people in the world when it comes to AI. He has a really impressive background, having delivered some serious AI initiatives. I think it's important to just figure out the right social feed because there's a lot of social content on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Twitter, or X. Figure out the right filters and social feed where it's a good mix between entertainment and education and um, but I think it's important to find passion projects as well. So find a passion project this month. And it's also important for some people that hesitate. The frustration I have is just start using it. So just use it tomorrow. Like every day, just spend 10 minutes and don't use the free version, get a paid version. and use it to do things that you didn't know were possible. Because that's my biggest issue in the space is it's not very hard to shock people. It's it's not hard for me to go give a talk and have people's mouths fall open because they can't believe what generative AI can do. And that's not because I'm awesome. It's not because I'm that good. It's because I use it. So if anyone uses it on a regular basis, it can do unbelievable things. You could write a 200-page book in a week, a
Yeah,
good one that gets published,
yeah,
and it'll write all the LaTeX for you as well.
yeah. I've been using it. I actually been using it to generate like a book on AI governance and some of the other documentation. I find it saves me so much time. It makes a lot of sense. I have enough common sense to know when it's hallucinating, so I know not to use certain things. So it's, yeah, the amount of things that are possible are just amazing. Because today we just created a Gantt chart in GPT-4 for essentially a project plan to create a book
Hmm.
earlier today. So there's so many possibilities that used to take weeks can now be done in minutes.
Oh, absolutely. It's the real limit is our own creativity, so that's why people need to use it. Well,
Well,
Vicky, it's
thank
been
you
such a
so much, Jefferson.
pleasure.
I appreciate your time. This was a very fascinating discussion, and I wish you good luck on your world tour. And hopefully, some of our audience members get to hear you speak in person. This sounds exciting.
I'd appreciate that. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.